Welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Ramita Iyer, a research analyst at the Institute. The G20 leaders met for a two-day summit in Bali, Indonesia this year. Under the theme of Recover Together, Recover Stronger, the leaders in a joint common declaration raised important issues such as food and energy security, climate and biodiversity, health and digital transformation. In this episode, I am joined by Ms Sharon Koshy, a research associate at the Center for Public Policy Research in Kochi, India. We discuss the G20 summit and other related developments. Sharon, welcome to South Asia Chat.
Thank you, Ramita.
At the summit this year, President Xi and President Biden engaged in a face-to-face meeting for over 3 hours. Could you throw some light on the meeting and its significance?
Yes, the meeting is significant on so many levels, especially given that this is the first in-person meeting that the two are having since Biden has assumed the presidency. And we're also aware of the very many issues that China and the US have been having for the past decade or so, especially since Trump has come into power, because the world is going through that trend of perhaps looking inward, perhaps fighting against globalization. And so there is always that blame game that is happening, especially when there is obvious trade imbalance, right? In this context, again, when Xi and Biden were meeting in Bali this year, there was this obvious platform that both leaders created in their home countries, because both of them came from a position of power at home. Xi having just reiterated his power as the unparalleled leader in the country after consolidating his power through the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. And for Biden, the future looks secure right now with the reasonable success in the midterms, right? So always that position of assurance gives negotiations that much strength. And it is the same case in international relations as well. Domestic gains obviously guarantee a leader considerable stature in the global milieu. So one interesting word that both sides used in their respective statements to describe the meeting was constructive. And also they emphasized the words like coexistence and balance. So I feel like a year ago, maybe we were thinking about how China is to be countered, how China is to be fought. But I think the rhetoric has now changed, especially in the Indo-Pacific context, now to accommodate China, because they have, at least the West has come to an agreement or an understanding rather, that you cannot leave out China when you're dealing with that bigger power, that big an economy. So balancing and coexistence is the key here. Again, the meetings is significant also on the footing that both these leaders have known each other for quite a while as a vice premier and vice presidents. That sort of a warmth in the greeting was there when they started off. And again, here you see how personal relations and connect in diplomacy is very important in international relations. And what is also important is the mindset of both these leaders. They are coming from a place of politically a strong background, and they are ready to stand their ground and speak bluntly, as they did with the points of divergences as well, while also showing the initiative to routinize dialogues and engagement mechanisms to iron out the issues in their bilateral relations. So this has indeed impacted the outcome of the meeting as well. I mean, for one, both sides are ready to strengthen their key officials to continue dialogue and communication, and therefore deepen constructive efforts towards balancing each other. There are already another meeting planned for Secretary of State Antony Blinken to visit China early next year, which will be a follow-up to the Biden-Xi meeting that happened in Bali. And for the meeting, they also discussed the sore points between the two countries' relations, particularly the three irritants in geopolitics, which are the North Korean missile tests and the military tensions in Taiwan Strait, as well as the war in Ukraine. So I'm not saying that one should gauge the success of the meeting by the outcomes or the agreements that were signed, because there were none of those. But I think the success is in the very fact that they are ready to take the next step to institutionalize and routinize dialogues and to build up to that constructive future. It also comes from a mutual understanding that one cannot choose to leave out the other in global geopolitics, because in a highly hyper-globalized world, rather, this would be rather impossible.
So traditionally, issues of security are not a part of the G20 discussions, which has been more focused on economic growth and prosperity. But in this year's summit, the question of Ukraine entered the discussions in different ways, be it food security, supply chain disruptions, or the general economic downturn. From a geopolitical perspective, what do you make of the declaration this year?
So this year's declaration has to be contextualized in a lot of global happenings and events, right? G20, historically speaking, G20 came together in a time of exceptional financial instability and insecurity. Hence, economic growth and prosperity, as well as fiscal policies, macroeconomic stability, has always been a point of focus for the forum. But we are at a juncture in history right now where geopolitics and geoeconomics are invariably interlinked, and the waves in one sector leads to unanticipated repercussions on the other, and the world is just warming up to its effects, especially since the pandemic. Here, of course, I'm talking particularly about the war in Ukraine, which has in fact created a global impact on geopolitical power shifting and economic security of many countries. Now, we have seen the waves created by the Ukraine war in terms of shocking supply chains, initiating huge crises in terms of food and agricultural shortage, as well as skyrocketing inflation in many countries across the globe. All of those leading to, instability in political economy of many less resilient countries, if I may, and falling of political bastions, governments. What's underway in Sri Lanka and other parts of South Asia is perhaps the single most important example of this trend. Now, of course, the G20 has recognized the context of these issues, which follows the disastrous effect the pandemic has had on everything from politics to economy to trade and agriculture. Recognition of this reality is actually core to expediting change in policy decisions, and it is also a testimony to the fact that the world does not work in silos anymore, right? We are in a hyper-globalized world, and I'm using this word without alluding to any negativity that is associated with the word, of course. It is impossible to not be influenced by the happenings around the world, given its global dimensions. And the war in Ukraine brings into discussion additional priority areas as well for G20, and rightfully so. We see an increased focus and call to action on non-traditional security challenges, which I feel like is a tremendous achievement by itself, because, for the longest time, by security, the word security only alluded to those hard security strategy, hard diplomacy perspectives. But now the world has increasingly come to understand that non-traditional security challenges have to be addressed if you're talking about long-term growth and economic security. So this has exacerbated an already existing challenge on global economy. So non-traditional security are transnational in nature. They constrain growth. They add to increasing inflation. They disrupt supply chains, heighten energy and food insecurity, and also elevate financial instability risks across the globe. So the statement that came out of 2022 Bali G20 was basically acknowledging the security issues that can have significant consequences for the global economy, and this particularly refers to non-traditional security challenges. Now, Indonesia's G20 presidency theme in itself is recover together, recover stronger. And this is a call to action for coordinated, actions to advance an agenda for a strong as well as resilient global recovery processes. This is also in connection to the G20 Matera Declaration, which again alludes to food security, ensuring that food systems better contribute to mitigating climate change and so on. And they are also showing willingness to collaboratively work with other multilateral fora and international organizations like UN, like the World Bank, like WTO, in terms of food, agriculture, trade, as well as sustainable initiatives. So we are living in a time of paradox. We increasingly see the trend of inward-looking economies talk about, the opposite of globalization. But we are also see multilateral fora like G20 coming together for causes that are transnational in nature, which is perhaps the stealthiest way, I think, of dealing with challenges of that scale.
So another highlight is that from December 1st of this year, India will take over the presidency of the G20. A few issues that have been emphasized by India in its run-up have been those of development, finance, and digital economy. This is, of course, of particular importance due to the global economic situation, um, especially given the war in Ukraine and the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you see India carrying this out, and what are the benefits in it for the country?
So I see an emergence of the theme of digital economy, perhaps from 2015, especially that was put forth by Turkey. Topics such as e-commerce, challenges faced by small and medium enterprises, skill development, cross-border data flow. All of these were, brought to the G20 agenda by Turkey. A little more than half a decade ago, and in the following years, we see an increased importance given to this particular agenda with the formation of Digital Economy Task Force at Hangzhou Summit in 2016, and then we see how later summits in 2017 with Germany as the president focusing on harnessing the potential for inclusive growth and employment through digital production and growth and so on. And we see an even bigger growth boost as well to G20 digital economy agenda from 2020, particularly because of COVID-19 pandemic. With the Italian presidency in 2021, the G20 countries actually acknowledged the crucial role that digital economy can play in enhancing economic recovery, particularly from the pandemic, with a particular reference to increasing market access for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And also during the presidency of Indonesia, we see how the Digital Economy Task Force has been upgraded to that of a Digital Economy Working Group. So all of this signify how the G20 agenda has been warming up to the prospects of digital economy and how it has been pushing the agenda, especially for developing economies to tap into and to harness. So issue areas that previously were prioritized under G20 like measuring digital economy, cooperation especially under e-commerce, ensuring consumer protection, data protection, bridging that digital divide, all of that find resonance in what India will be taking up in its 2023 presidency. So I feel like there are a few areas particularly that we can focus on in our presidency next year. Our priorities have included, building digital infrastructure, because for India to harness the opportunities that are presented by digital economy, we need a solid infrastructure in place. So, a Digital India initiative that is, put forth by the government of India is committed to improving digital inclusion by increasing broadband connectivity and availability through optimal fiber networks across the villages in India. And this is also aimed at expanding India's telecom base. And at the Osaka summit, India has also reiterated the crucial role of digital infrastructure in overcoming capacity constraints, right? So in 2021, again, India reiterated the importance of digital inclusion and bridging the digital divide by ensuring that there is last mile connectivity to Gram Panchayats as well. And this has been covered through BharatNet, and as of now, we have about 66.5% of Gram Panchayats covered under the scheme. So we have been laying the groundwork, we have been doing the ground research, connecting the broadband connectivity to what's happening at ground level, all of which are activities that will lead up to us being in a place to enable harnessing the benefits and opportunities presented by digital economy. And another thing that we can actually focus on, and India is actually doing quite a lot in this area as well, is to build up digital skills, because even if there are opportunities presented, even if there are infrastructure in place, if the people are not aware and if people are lacking the skills, they wouldn't be able to tap into it. So this will be important for equitable, inclusive and sustainable economics. And this will also impact positively livelihoods and as well as accelerate various sectors. It will also strengthen supply chains, because we are increasingly worried about global events disrupting supply chains. So if we are integrating our local markets to a digital market, this will enable transfer of benefits, transfer of raw materials, transfer of passage of produced goods. So all of that would enable a cyber safe world as well as increased positive impact on livelihoods. Moreover, India has also acknowledged the central role of technology and digitization in enabling government response to disruption. And this has been realized particularly in the context of COVID-19. And we were very blessed that way, or rather our planning was far ahead that way, that we had in place at least the groundwork for the infrastructure for these public services deliveries to be done in times of strife like COVID-19, where private and public players both were in a position to deliver their services digitally and at minimal cost as well. So I think India is well poised in its presidency in the coming year to take advantage of these many opportunities presented by digital economy, while also propagating it as one of the most important tools for inclusive growth for other developing nations as well.
So there's also talk that India's G20 presidency has already begun creating waves in domestic politics, and it is anticipated that this could likely shape voter thoughts in the 2024 general elections. What are your thoughts on this?
So I feel like it matters for a country to have an international public image to be built, for it to shape its own identification of what a country looks like. I mean, it is not, it may sound a little bit complicated, but again, it really depends on, say, I am an Indian, and the way I am perceived when I go outside it matters to me psychologically. And so when India as a global leader is being projected as one, earlier it used to be an emerging economy, it's still an emerging economy, but at least its stature worldwide has changed to that of a global leader. So that in fact drills a sort of psychological advantage in the citizens of India, and this will definitely, I feel like, benefit the current central government in the run-up to 2024 general elections. So there is a concerted push for Global South here, right? So India is well poised as a country representing the Global South, representing the emerging economies, ready to tap into opportunities and to project itself as a country of power with its military, economy, human resource, etc., etc. So we see that in the run-up to general elections in 2024, we have also planned a lot of activities, especially in the sidelines of G20, engaging the countries, engaging the states all over India. So this is, I think, one of the strategic decisions that this current government has taken, because especially in the South India, they are looking for an opportunity for a foothold, and engaging these South Indian states strategically in the upcoming presidency is again coming from a visionary thought process. And also India is putting forth a global campaign for inclusive, ambitious, action-oriented presidency. Here, what is important is the optics, particularly because we are tapping into the power of diaspora, soft diplomacy, which we obviously witnessed in the past G20 summit that just got over, and how Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a very warm relation with many of the leaders of global powers. So here, I feel like it lifts up the spirit of Indian citizens to see that sort of a stature that India has among world powers, and this inevitably translates to them feeling proud of their country, and that I feel like would have a great effect on how India, the current government or the other governments would fare in the 2024 general elections. And the activities planned, especially in the various states, it will engage various platforms like B20, T20, and Youth 20, all taking advantage of the diversity that is going to be brought forth. So speculations are rife that the central government will indeed try to engage those areas, particularly South India, because from a election point of view, the South eludes BJP rule. This could be one, possible way for engaging the South, showcasing the glamour, the pomp that comes with G20 presidency, and I feel like this will have a positive impact on the elections. Again, I'm not an expert in political commentary, but I think this would be my opinion.
Finally, India seems to be in a unique position as a country that's close to both the West and the East. You too mentioned India now being, a leader of the global South. Do you see Delhi playing a role and engaging with the different sides in the coming year?
Absolutely, because I feel like one advantage that we have is this very unique position. Because, from a point of being non-aligned to now being multi-aligned, as our Minister of External Affairs, S. Jaishankar, would say, we are in a position where we have many friends. We have divergences with them, of course. That's not what I'm denying, but we are friends with them, we are partners with them. And, from a world of when we talked about bipolarity, where the world economies and the world leaders were, parsed into different camps, we are in a position where we are talking about strategic autonomy, where you are not eternal partner of any one country. You are actually exercising that sort of a diplomacy in the world platform for your own national interest. So definitely India's uniqueness as a partner of the West as well as Russia does present the opportunity to derive the best out of both camps. There is immense pressure on India to stop buying oil from Russia, but our resilience as a country that leverages its own national interest has come to the forefront now more than ever. And now the best possible outcome of this, besides reiterating our national interest, is how, despite this slight irritant, the West and India have brushed aside this conflict in interest. For example, we have so many irritants in our relationship with the West, particularly with the US. However, we still have a very resilient partnership in terms of many other sectors. So this sort of a multilateral engagement or multi-alignment, which is banked in on strategic autonomy, is what we want from a globalized world, in fact. And India is doing its bit to be the voice of Global South here again by many of our initiatives like the International Solar Alliance and the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative that would again integrate the Global South further towards many causes, in fact. So climate change is one aspect that India and many countries, emerging economies and in the Global South are particularly focused on, because this is something that affects our economic growth as well as our sustainability initiatives as well. So this is one point that we agree with the Global South, and we can work together with the Global South. And also when it comes to tackling global events of global proportions like the pandemic, again India could be that that voice that can represent the Global South. And one thing to add here is, again, this presidency that is upcoming in 2023 is an immense opportunity for India to steer that conversation again. So I feel like there are issue areas that we can focus on. So when PM Modi talks about an inclusive foreign policy, an inclusive and action-oriented presidency, I'm thinking about an inclusive foreign policy as well, which will have gender inclusive ideations happening, because I feel like gender is something that is left out of conversations regarding foreign policy, and or domestic policies as well. But this is one area we can focus on. And also, there are debates and discussions happening whether we should include African Union in the G20, which is again presenting an immense opportunity, because when we are talking about renewable energy and supply chain resilience, we cannot leave out that big of a continent which with that much population, and with which many of the G20 countries in fact have thriving trade relations. So these are certain areas that we can actually focus on if we want to be ideally the voice of the global south, because India should ideally represent the concerns and voices of the global south. And I feel like India could be that bridge between the West and the and the global south here.
Thanks so much, Sharon, for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure to have you. You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.